maybe you're asleep, which means I did a good job. I'm always honored in classes when people fall asleep because you feel safe enough to fall asleep with me. Um, thank you for joining me. That was the first meditation I ever did when I was in college, back in 2004, taking an introductory to Eastern religion class. My practice, I'll just kind of get right into it. I've had a back and forth kind of relationship with Buddhism and mindfulness and meditation. And um, I think when Nit asked me to speak, I'm a researcher and like an academic, and I also work in education. So usually when I'm asked to speak to a large group of people, I'm like, look at my graphs and let's talk about science and look at all look at these info, look at all this information I'm going to throw at you. Um, and it's a little bit more challenging and definitely vulnerable for me to speak about something that has been such a big part of my life for so long that I kind of keep very personal and to myself. But I studied Eastern religion in college and really just became really fascinated with it. That's when I started to go to yoga practice and yoga classes. I fell in love with the practice of Ashtanga, and I've been an Ashtanga yoga practitioner for since I was in college again. And I graduated college in 2008, so it's been a cool minute that I've been practicing yoga and meditation and mindfulness. And I knew from a really young age that there was suffering in the world. I'm the youngest of five people in my family, and I saw an immense amount of suffering within my home, mainly with my siblings, and then the suffering that then I also had to experience, coming from a home that was filled with anyone, if they went to my trauma talk that I did for BFP, that was filled with lots of adverse childhood experiences as a child. And so I came from a pretty challenging home environment. And ever since I was little, I always was the peacekeeper of my family. I just wanted everybody to get along. I wanted everyone to be okay. I wanted the suffering to stop. And that is something, that trait was in any friend group that I was in, and has evolved all the way now to I'm almost 40 years old, and I've been doing the same type of work of giving and trying to ameliorate suffering on a daily basis. So it's not just something that I knew from a really young age, it's also what I've done to pivot into what has been now my life's work and what will continue to be my life's work. And when I think about what that means to me in my practice, it really comes down to just the most simple of terms of ahimsa. And I care about it so much. I'm not sorry, that's the one you gave me, that tattoo. I showed the wrong one. It really means so much to me that I got it tattooed on me when I was 25 years old. um and I just always knew that I needed to be in some type of caregiving role. And that idea of that, I taking a circumstantial view of every single human that I interact with, right? Thinking that there is no such thing as a bad person. There's only bad circumstances and bad environment and all of these different things. And I knew that that was true from the experiences that I had. But I also then created a path for myself where I wanted to work with kids. And I definitely wanted to work with kids who were impacted by those same adversities that I had experienced. And so when I was in college, I decided that I wanted to be in education and I wanted to work with kids. And I did my student teaching in this town in Virginia that was basically in Appalachia. So it's in one of the most poorest part of the countries. And that just opened up my eyes to a whole new world that I didn't even know um existed, but I loved it. I remember my classmates were always like, "You want to drive to Appalachia to do your student teaching?" And I was like, "Yeah, like these are the kids who need it the most, right?" And I learned really young who the kids were that needed the extra snacks and who needed things. So I always would come to student teaching with saltines and peanut butter and just little snacks to give the kids, because I was just like, they're still hungry. Like, so I'm gonna bring them snack. I'm like a poor college student, but I was like, I need to feed these kids. They don't, they're still hungry after snack and recess or whatever it was. And so, then as I moved around the country and I worked in different capacities, I found myself always coming back to these communities of immense suffering. So I went to graduate school in LA, and I worked in Compton Unified School District, Long Beach School District, and Los Angeles Unified School Districts, serving the most impacted students, not only in terms of communities really, really with a lot of racial disparities, with a lot of poverty, with a lot of houselessness, with a lot of food insecurity. And these were the communities that I would work with. I also learned about gangs, and I learned about the complexity of all of these things because I was working at Compton High, and I was 24 years old working there going, oh, what is this? This is something that I've never really quite experienced. But seeing these communities and these ecosystems at school that were created out of just survival. And I soon became, for so many kids, just their person. To this day, I still get calls from kids that I met 15 years ago who call me, because I haven't ever changed my cell phone number, who call me and invite me to their kids something, or ask me if I want to go to their graduation, or ask me for letters of recommendation. And at that point, I didn't really know that what I was doing was just being a safe person for them. But what I did was ahimsa, right? No matter what you did, I loved you and I cared for you, and I wanted to end your cycle of suffering. And that bled into every single thing that I did for the years that I was down in Los Angeles working within those communities. And eventually then I made my way, and I got another degree along the way there, and I started working in Seattle, and I moved to Washington State, and that's where I started to work and provide yoga in carceral facilities. So through another organization called Yoga Behind Bars in Washington, I taught a weekly class at Monroe Maximum Security, and everyone was always like, what made you want to do that? And I was like, well, all day I'm like working in schools. I work in special education, and I work in special education, and I work in general education. So I work with kids who have really challenging behaviors, whether it be from like traumatic experiences and they're getting into fights every day, or they have autism or ADHD. I kind of work the whole spectrum. And I was like, well, I'm not really scared of a bunch of folks. What are they gonna, I'm crisis trained, and I'm not scared. They're humans. They just want to do yoga. And I started working with that organization, and that was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my entire life, was teaching a weekly class for 5 years to a bunch of folks on the inside at Monroe Correctional Facility. And I knew when a family member passed away of one of the guys. I knew when a visit went well. I knew when a visit was supposed to happen and last minute got canceled. I spent birthdays with the guys. I went in for Christmas every year. I tried to spend a holiday when I could with them. And we created this community there that was so incredibly beautiful. And I knew that it was powerful, and I knew that what I was doing was, transformative for these guys. But, I didn't realize until my last day, just like how impactful it was when I was in a group of, my class was quite large. I had 35 folks in my class with me. Yeah, it was me and 35 folks. Sometimes I'll say I also was able to get some corrections officers to do a class with me if the guys permitted. I sweet talked two of them, and they would come in sometimes. If they looked cranky, I'd be like, "You want to come and sit for the first 15 minutes? You seem like you could use it. It's a long day. Why don't you come in?" And I we created such a beautiful community. And there was this one guy, his name was Ryan, and he came no matter what was going on, he identified as indigenous, and like literally in 5 years, everything that could happen to this man happened to him. And my last day of class, he had this beautiful long hair all the way down his back. And my last class, I noticed that his hair was cut, and I had known that what that meant was that a dear loved member of his family had passed away, and it was his mom that passed away. And he shared with me that happened to be my last class because I was moving to Hawaii. That he said the only reason he came to class was that he knew that he would be held for 2 hours and that he would be safe for 2 hours. And then he shared with me, they had a native garden of all like indigenous plants, and he was kind of like the leader of that at the facility. And he picked herbs for me, and he tied a little bag for me. What I now know is like probably should not have taken that because that would be qualified as contraband. But 100% would qualify. But I was like, it's my last day, whatever. But he sewed me a bag, and put native plants that he dried for me, and he blessed with me from his tribe. And he just said, like, you've changed my life forever, and like I'll never be able to talk to you again because we weren't going to be able to communicate. And he's like, I'll never see or talk to you again, and like you've changed my life. And like I'm a puddle, just like sobbing, he's sobbing, then the whole room is sobbing. And I didn't, like, you knew that it was good stuff, but I didn't realize just how good the stuff was until that moment. And then from that moment, fast forward another, it's been 8 years since that moment, or 9 years since that moment. And I now work with detained youth, and I now work in the carceral systems in Santa Clara County. So I work for the juvenile hall and what's called the ranch. And I work with boys and girls who have tremendous adversity in their lives, and I just show up for them every day at their school. I'm the person who talks to them when they're on the ledge, who, tell them, get out of the class before you punch the CO. Let's go walk with me. Let's shoot some hoops before you do something regrettable. Or, I write them letters when they're about to get released, or I visit them when they get their first job at Safeway, when they exit and go into aftercare. And I have dedicated my life to serving those who suffer most, and for wherever that suffering is. And so the concept of ahimsa, which when I first learned about it way back in the beginning of this talk, when I was working in Virginia, and a silly college student, has truly transformed every single aspect of my life. I love the work I do. I have kids who just one of my kids reached out to me last week, and she was in a detox facility because she relapsed, and she felt like she couldn't call anybody. And I haven't seen her in 6 years, and she called me because she knew that I would answer. And so since then, I've helped her, and we picked out where she's going to go to rehab, and we looked at, how I can get on her list to go and visit her. And so it's just these things that, people, if you love people and you're kind to people, and you take a circumstantial view of everybody, even when there is more problematic, disruptive, or challenging behaviors or traits that are occurring, like, it matters. It truly, as simple as it is, being kind and loving and forgiving, and knowing that redemption is possible, and that you're not defined by a moment or a couple of moments in your life that were challenging, is why I continue to do what I do. And I'll share one last thing. It's so deeply ingrained in who I am, and it's such a big part of me that I brought foster children into my home. And so I had a beautiful son who passed away 2 years ago, who was also involved in the system and was detained. And we had a lot of stuff going on with him, not just the complexities of trauma, but also the complexities of a youth who was coming into contact quite a bit with the system, living in my home. And I became his biggest advocate, and I became his voice, and I became his biggest fighter. And I got a whole new world of what ahimsa truly is, when you have a kid breaking every window in your house and punching you in the face or threatening to, and then you just go, let's just breathe and go for a walk, and you still have a place to stay. Like you're still here. It's okay. And we're gonna fix the windows. So, this is it's all about the balance, right? And even though his passing is truly I don't like to talk about it. I can't really talk about it because it's a little bit too much for me to go into sometimes. But he has given us the greatest gift, which is his sister. And his sister moved back in with us, and she had a very similar background to him. And we've known her since she was 16, and she just moved back in January, and now our 22-year-old is back in the house with us, and our family feels whole and complete. But it isn't just about the work that I do. It's how I think that all human beings should interact with each other, is not take anything seriously, just knowing if someone's having a bad moment, they're having a bad moment, and it's okay. We don't know what happened 5 seconds, 5 minutes, or 5 days before that. um and yeah, ahimsa for me is my path, and will continue to be my path. And I think that I had nothing prepared, so I think that is where I messaged Noot and I was like, I don't have anything